since this is going to be about talking about transitioning AutoCAD details to your Revit library, this is not as an advanced kind of webinar in terms of going through and creating custom family or detail blocks for, detail components. I apologize. But we will be talking about the first iteration of what you would want to get in quickly, some details. The second iteration I'll talk about as well as where you would want to move to later at some point. And again, this is an interactive webinar. There is some PowerPoint, but we'll be in the software. So please ask any questions. I love going off on tangents. So let's see, longtime Revit user, architect experience, just learning, great. Pivot manager, long time. Awesome, thanks, Thomas. Are we familiar with or bringing in AutoCAD details into Revit? That would be another question, but let's get started here. So today we're going to be talking about quickly build your AutoCAD library into Revit. So we are going to be bringing some AutoCAD details using some CTC tools to help us transition all of those AutoCAD line styles. I don't bring anything else in. We'll talk about that as we go through the process, because there is a wrong way to do this. There is 100% the wrong way to bring in your AutoCAD details from AutoCAD into Revit, but there is a right way. So it can be done, and we just need to know the right way to do this and accomplish it. But today I'll be showing you some tools that'll help your process. I'll also give you some tips on being able to do it at the beginning of what you could do, then using the tools to expedite that process is kind of what I'll be going through and talking as we walk through this process. So my name is Michael Chave. I'm a senior AEC technical specialist here at ATG USA. Again, if you're watching this as a recording, feel free to use the comment area, like and subscribe, please. It helps us out, and you'll get great content videos like this, or attend next time and ask me any questions that you have. Again, this is a live interactive webinar, so I am not going to not regard any of the questions. Please ask me any questions as we go along. I like the ability to interact with everyone that's listening in. It helps us go along, and it helps me. All right, so next, we're going to be talking about struggling getting our AutoCAD library into Revit, and what are some of the quick ways we can do this. Specifically, I'm going to talk around two of the tools that we can use from. One is from the BIM Manager Suite, which is a free tool. It is called Detail Link. The other tool we'll be using is from the BIM Manager Suite. It is a paid-for tool, and that one is going to be Type Swapper. We're going to be going through and how to use both of those tools. First, I'm going to talk about the process. Then I'll use the tools to show you how you can do it with these tools. But first, I'm going to tell you the correct way to do this to start out, okay? And again, at any point, feel free to ask any questions if you have any. But let's talk. So what you don't want to do, right? What you don't want to do is you don't want to go into your Revit project, right? We're talking about an actual design project, bring in or link in an AutoCAD detail. Well, it's not linked, import it because that's how you're going to explode it. And then someone goes in and explodes that detail. What happens when you have an exploded detail? So if everyone, maybe a little bit of background of how Revit works off of components, categories, elements, system families. All of these things that are built into Revit get assigned a global unique identifier. It's called a GUID value. It's a 32 caricature value that allows it to communicate to push and pull data. It's just like me pressing a key on my keyboard. It sends a line item of ones and zeros to the processor and then gives me an output on the screen. The way Revit processes data and information is through these GUID values. So if I go through and import a CAD detail, and we'll just show you because right? We all want to see. So if I go in and import a CAD detail, which some folks do, right? And we'll say this is an actual project. This is my proxy project that I use to go through and run this. And there they are. So if I go in here and I bring over a CAD detail and I just, we'll just go and grab this one here. And I say current, well, I need to create a drafting view. We'll just do whatever scale for this instance, just to show you. So if I go through and do this, grab that detail, I'm importing it. And we'll just do black and white. Great. So from here, if I go through and import this detail, I unpin it, right? And then I explode it. This is what we don't want to do, full explode in a project, right? I bring this into a project that I have and I explode it. All of these are given individual values, individual GUID values that are assigned to them as well. And it becomes an issue. We then have our own new text styles, dimension styles, fill patterns associated, all these line styles associated, all of these in our project, right? This is not what we want to do. That is the incorrect way of going through and doing this process. And maybe we've done this. Maybe we just didn't know the correct way of going through and creating our AutoCAD detail library into our newly created Revit environment, or maybe we're a long-term user and this has been the process and it hasn't been an issue, right? Maybe we don't have large projects that take up a lot of file size and we just haven't noticed a issue for processing speed, right? Maybe that's one of the case scenarios. But let's go through and talk about what the right process is to go through and create these details that we have large libraries from our AutoCAD environments, right? We're transitioning from this 2D environment to this 3D parametric workflow that we're excited to embrace, right? So what we're going to talk about today is using the detail link. That is the free tool from the BIM project suite to link in AutoCAD details at mass, right? This is going to be the quickest way to get a lot of details right into my project in mass. Then I would go through and bring that AutoCAD data and transition it to already created Revit data. And that's using Type Swapper. It is a paid-for tool from the CTC suite, BIM Manager suite. The next one is we'll talk about the end goal. What is the next step, right? What's our next steps after we have done this? First, we just needed the details to get in there. Now, what do we do after, right? So we'll go through and talk about that after. How do you choose an appropriate scale for the view? So typically I have my details. It's whatever details scale you're bringing in is what the details scale you be of your drafting view. So it's at scale, whatever your AutoCAD detail is that you're bringing into Revit. Hopefully that helps, right? Okay. And you can verify because you're going to be taking live dimensions because everything is drawn at scale in Revit, where AutoCAD, we're moving things to a scale. Okay, so let's hop on into Revit. Somewhere in here, I have mine open. Thank you. So this is a proxy project, right? This is how you want to go through and transition your details over. You probably are going to go file new project from your template, your company templates. Maybe it's in here, maybe it's not. There's different Revit files, right? You have a .rte, which is a Revit template, or a .rvt, which is a project. And you can actually have a .rvt that is your project. I mean, that is your template, but it's not a .rte. That's because you maybe have work sets enabled in your template, so you want to have a .rvt. But you go through here and you're going to use this as your proxy, right? It's your exploding files. This is where you're going to do all of the dirty work, and then you're going to clean it up before you bring those details directly into your project for future use, right? This is not in a project. It's in a container file separate from your project. I just like to reiterate that just so we all know we shouldn't be doing this in our projects. It should be in a proxy project as we go through and do this as well. Don't worry, I've been there. I used to do it this way. I didn't know better. So don't fret, everyone that is doing it this way. We can, start the new process and going and doing this the correct way. Okay, so I'm going to X out of this detail because that was just an example of what we're going to go through. Now, typically, we're going to start with AutoCAD. Typically, in the past, I haven't really talked about the details and what we would do in here before we bring them over. But I like to let everyone know what I do in my process of going through an AutoCAD prior to saving this file and then bringing them in. This is the only one I've modified from my files, but what you can go through and do is I personally, now this is your judgment call. If you want to go through and figure out your hatch patterns, by all means, keep your hatch patterns in here. But I personally do not bring in anything but my line data. So I'm going to go through and delete everything out that is specific, that is not going to be dimensions, and it's not going to be any of my text items for these ones, okay? All it's going to be is my line enriched data. And I just prefer, it's again, to each their own. I don't like to bring in hatch patterns because I don't want to have to deal with them. I'm going to make them filled regions anyways. So I'm going to make that directly in Revit. I prefer to just have my line data being brought over. I'll annotate it with Revit annotation after it's been brought in. But again, to each their own. If you want to bring in your annotation and then transition them out to different dim styles and make sure they work, I've just had bad experience in the past with dimensions from AutoCAD into Revit. So I prefer just to bring my line data in. I'm giving you options. You just decide which option you want to follow. Now from here, I also go through and run an overkill. What is Overkill Command in AutoCAD? When I first heard this, I was like, is this really a command? It is, everyone. So some of us have used it before, so we're probably like, yeah, we already know, Michael. That's fine. Well, first and foremost, two things I do as well is check my layers, right? So I want to make sure I have all of my layers that aren't needed. I'll do a purge, but make sure I don't have unnecessary layers in here. I can go through and delete them out as well. I moved everything to specific layers as well, making sure everything was correct prior. Because some folks use a pen plot style, which is fine too. Just be aware it's going to be easier if you know what layers are associated to line styles in Revit, so that when you move them over, they're associated to the new Revit line styles. Because Revit, when we have detail lines, right, in Revit, they're seen as line styles. So what layers are going to correspond to my line styles over here? And you saw I exploded that other one. So now I have these unnecessary ones in here, which is what I didn't want to have in the first place. So I'll close this proxy and reopen it. But this should just have what I have natively in here. So I'll close this. I'll reopen it. I'll go back to here. And I'll look at my line styles. Now I've created two extra ones. The ones with the less than and greater than symbol are native. I created two extra ones just to move things on to layers, from layers to line styles that weren't existing in out of the box Revit. You can create your own new line styles, but just think of your line styles. Those layers are going to be transitioned to line styles into here when you're thinking about this process, okay? Now, one tip for everyone. If you wanted to bring this in and it explode it and have these already onto the correct line styles, you could hypothetically name the line style the same as the layer. Those layers will automatically go to the same line style. So that is one process too, but I'm going to go through this with a tool and quickly do that. So that's just a quick tip for everyone, okay? If this layer's named the same and the line style is named the same, these will be put onto that line style in Revit. But from here now, if I go through, again, run the overkill, this is going to go through and delete any duplicate stacked lines. So if there's a line on top of another line, it's going to delete it. Now they're all singular. And then I'll do a full purge. Purge all checked items. Thank you. Now what I can go through and do is save this out. I like to save these with the correct naming convention that I am going to use as their drafting view names. Why is that? Because we're going to use a tool that's going to name them by the file saved name. So I will go through and name them as that file saved name to show you as well. For this instance, I'm just going to save as a different one because I like to have my extra one before I changed it, right? So I'll just do EX for this example here. Great. So now I've gone through and prepped my .dwg for import into Revit, okay? By all means, you can link details into Revit as well. We just have all probably been there. They don't look the same, right? That's also a way to have your details into a project from AutoCAD. But I want to bring these as a permanent detail into my project. So now I can hit exit and go back over to here. I'm going to draw that at a 3/4 scale for my details. Then I'm going to name this as stepped footing. This is the current process, right? I don't need to do this either because I have this other tool. Under the CTC tools, now we're bringing in the tools. We're going to talk about these. There's 3 different suites here and a content management library. This is actually my last step where I'll bring my details into my CMS system. So they're cloud hosted. But you have BIM batch suite, you have manager suite, and project suite. These are 3 different suites. You can tell by the colors of the icons. The lighter color icons are free tools, and the paid for icons are the dark colored tools. Now, if I go and look under BIM project suite, Detail Link is a free tool. I'm showing you that today. You can download this and have it forever and use it for free. If you want Type Swapper, it is a paid for tool under the BIM Manager suite. Now, first I'll go through and create a detail link for all of my details that I want to bring in. This is the quickest way because again, the old process is file drafting view, name it, then import it. This is going to do all of those in a matter of seconds for me. So all I have to do here is go and add my details, go to my detail library that I have DWGs that I've gone through and processed, hit OK. Now I brought in these all here. I'm going to do a shift. I'm not going to select my demo ones that I've done before for that step footing. And I'm going to add, that's that EX one. I'm going to add all of these to here. So now I'm saying I selected all from this file. I browsed to that file folder. Then it said, great, Mike, I found all of these in that folder. What do you want to do with them? I want to select them so that I can bring them into my project. Then I hit OK. You could also do this with images. So if you had any image files that you wanted to bring in mass, you can do that too from here. The next 2 steps are, okay, do you want to automatically create drafting views? Yes, I do. Or do you want to enter a name for a new drafting view for each file? I want it to auto create them. And guess what it's going to do? Since I don't have any drafting views, you could say select an existing one so that it places these there. But I want these, if I click auto create, it's going to name them whatever their end naming convention was. So I don't have to even name my drafting views. This isn't going to bring them in at a set scale that they're supposed to be at. So if you know what they're drawn at, you can change the scale because it's going to be set at the scale of whatever they were drawn at. So from here now, all I have to do is say import or link. They brought import back, by the way. It used to only be link. So by popular demand, CTC listens to the community. It was requested, and now it's back, which is great because now I can import them. So I'm going to import all of these, and we'll see on my left-hand side, my drafting views are starting to be created. It created a footing. I should have probably dropped this down, but I didn't have one. But it's going to go through and import all of these 15 drafting views in a matter of seconds for me, where I didn't have to go drafting view, hit OK, drafting view, rename it, drafting view, hit OK, and then bring them in. So now I'm going to go to that stepped footing, and now it's been brought in. So now I'm going to change the scale of what it was supposed to be at, what it was drawn at. And then again, in my proxy folder, I can go up here and run my full explode. Now, if these were all associated to the correct lines in terms of if I already did the other process, which was going through and creating line styles that were similar to the naming convention I had before, they would have been adopted directly to those, okay? Since that wasn't here before, it brought these in. And this is what you don't want to have happen from the AutoCAD environment. And it doesn't only just bring these in. If you have dimension styles or hatch patterns, it'll bring them in and add them all. They'll be baked into your project now. And that is unnecessary content in our project that we don't need moving forward, right? And if we have more content in our project, more processing power we're going to need for our project moving forward, which just tends to have lower speeds in what we're going through and practicing, right? So what we're going to do here is, I'm not going to do it from this view, but the other way would be, right, okay, they did transition over, okay, so now we're done, now we can go and dimension things. Or I would have to go through and highlight each view, grab whatever one was supposed to be on something like, hey, I know concrete was supposed to be on a line style of wide lines, right? So that I can see my line styles. Maybe that's my process. That was the old way, right? I don't have to go through and do that with the tool that I'm going to show you next. Under the CTC tab, I have Type Swapper. Now, what this allows me to do is I'm allowed to go through and see duplicate families. So this is if I like bring in something from a link or from another project, it'll duplicate a family and put like 0.1, or not 0.1, it just puts 1. So if you had any duplicate families in a project, this is also a great tool for that. Now, if you're one of those folks that likes bringing in your dim styles from AutoCAD and Revit, that's fine. I don't prefer that method, but you can do this as well. So you'll find your AutoCAD lines that were brought in. You'll have a count. They'll show them for you. Sorry, AutoCAD dimensions. You'll have a count of what there is. You can see I have no dimensions placed in my project, and then you'll swap them to something that is a Revit-based style. And then you can delete that one that was brought in from here with the delete button. Next one is text. So if you were one of those folks that likes having your text brought in, by all means, you can do so. With this tool, it's easy. You'll see a count, and then you'll change them to the new text that you'd like. Next one is the line styles. This is what I do want. So now I can go through and see concrete. So all I have to do is run and explode on all of these. I don't have to go to each one, move them over one by one, because I can see from this view what was added and what's been created. So from here, there's 14 instances of this S concrete style that was directly brought in from AutoCAD. And I need this to be brought into my wide lines, right? Because that's how I visually show a concrete line in my detail view. So from here now, what I can do is I can just select this one and say, this is supposed to be brought over to wide lines. And then I can hit swap. But let's say this is something we do all the time, or not all the time. We're starting to bring these in as details and fix our library. I can actually hit load selection, which I already have an old selection here. So all I have to do is go to my details, my Revit template selection, and say, hey, right, as I look over here, nothing's really selected except for the one that I showed, and just hit open. It's now going to change these to what they were supposed to be for me. So I don't have to go through and rechange these on what they are. It knows when it sees this to be this. And then all I have to do is hit swap, and went through and change those to what they were supposed to be now. And then I can go through and delete these out on which ones I don't need from here, right? So if you wanted to go through and delete those, you can delete them out of your project, and now they no longer exist. The other one is line patterns that were brought in, which you can see there's a ton here. Great. So I can go through and delete these out. Then the other ones I can go and delete out would be fill patterns. So if you're one of those folks that brings in any fills, right, they're now going to become filled regions. They'll have a fill pattern associated to them. If you did bring those in, by all means, you can. You just have to go through this and change them out to what they should be. And you're able to see that from this view as well. And then delete them. If you have a selection that's typically of what follows them, then you're going to see them there as well. So now this is complete. I can now see my detail and you can start annotating it. I prefer to annotate it within Revit. So again, to each their own on how they're going to go through and annotate it. It's completely up to them. But you have the option of going through and annotating directly in here versus over there. Then you would go through and use some of your filled regions. Now let's talk about the next step. After you've done everything, these are all lines. The next step would be probably to change things out from your AutoCAD typical lines that we're used to seeing to detail components. Why do I want detail components, Mike? Because our typical workflow would be to go and annotate something like W10 by 12, right? And maybe I don't do spaces here. Boom. Oops, sorry. This is our current workflow that we're used to going through and doing with an arrow pointing to this. This is not the workflow. Well, this is the workflow we're used to, right? Things that aren't annotative, that aren't going to be parametric to data. When things change, right, in sizes, this doesn't get updated. But what we are able to do, since we are in Revit, and what we should do is we should start creating detail components after. We got everything in, great. Now what we should be doing is creating detail components in our project, in our drafting views, in our details. So these are annotated not by text, but by tags. So typically I would create a detail item tag to go through and tag these. So that's parametric as well, right? So I'm going to quickly create a detail tag. If no one's seen or known how to do that, great. I'm going to show you. You're just going to go to annotation. I'm just going to go to generic tag here. I guess I could have done a multi-category tag, but I'm going to grab a label of text. I want to grab the type name, hit OK. I'm doing this fast, I know. This isn't supposed to be more explanatory. I'm not supposed to go over in depth of explaining this, but if you need to, I can. It's totally fine. Bring this in. I'm going to change the category to be a detail item because that's how Revit tags work. They work off of the category. They're going to tag by those specific items. And I'm just going to bring this in my project. Go to this view and now it's tagged, right? So I'm tagging things now that have the data that are supposed to be driven by what the detail component is. And if you don't like this, you can always do free end and then move this over. It's fine. And of course, tags don't snap, but there we are. So now if I change this to something completely different or a different size, right, the tag lives with it versus this old thought process of having to update things, right? Now we're creating detail components with our older existing details and transitioning over. That's the process we would want to go through. Great, Mike. Now that we're done with that, but this is in a proxy folder. How do I bring this over? So you want to make sure you clean everything out, right? Like I just did. And then you can also go through and purge things out if you'd like as well. You can run a full purge, not as well. You should go through and do that. And then maybe if you wanted to, you can bring this over into another proxy library folder that has your content of whatever these details are. For this instance, this would be all structural foundation details. I'd bring it into there, or you can save these out as individual instances. Now, if you save them out as individual instances and someone brings it in as a project for that, if they go to insert view from, if they go and insert from a file that it's a single one out saved, they're only going to have the option of that single one out saved, right? So if I go file, save as this project, I'm going to save this to my desktop as my example here, save here. Now, if I close this out, let me make sure I saved it in the right place. I always click too quick on that. Yeah, okay. So now if I close this out, I'm not going to save this tag, and I open up a new project. And I go to insert, then I go and load from that project, right? Since I didn't save these out individually, which I'll show you how to do next. But when I go and grab that project, it's going to show me all of those. Now, the next step, maybe you have a typical foundation sheet. You could put all of these drafting views on a sheet and then just bring in the sheet and then bring the drafting views with them. So that's another solution. Or maybe you have a cloud hosted storage like Hive, for instance, which would host all of your detail views as well. That could be one. The other way would be to individually save them out. So if I go back and hit open that project from my desktop, how can I save these out as individual? I'll show you that as well. So if I open this one up and I decide to save them out individually, which you can, you just right click, save to a new file. This is just its own file, okay? So it's not going to be, when someone goes to insert it, it's going to be not available to select multiple. It's just going to be this single one here. So those are your options. Do we have any questions about the two tools we went through so far? Detail Link and Type Swapper. Or any questions about the process? Yeah, Type Swapper is huge. It's a great tool, and it is in the BIM Manager suite. By the way, if you don't have any of these tools, you can download them right now for free. It's a 14-day free trial, so you can test them out. You get the full use and capabilities of all of the tools in that suite to use for 14 days. If you would like to keep them forever, because there's more tools in some of these suites like Import Manager Link, DIM Checker. So if you want to check dimensions from a received coordination project, because we all know some, well, hopefully no one fudges dimensions, but if they did, you could check that. You also have Project Cleaner. This is a free tool from the BIM Manager suite. You can check all of our older videos. I love using this tool, especially when I'm coordinating with project partners and sending a coordination model. Over in the project suite, I love using Model Compare just to compare two different models that have been sent for coordination. There's a lot of tools. I don't know the prices for these tools. We can definitely get you more info. There's going to be a survey at the end. I believe it's going to ask if you want more info. If not, we can get with a rep that's in your region. At the end, again, it's going to probably request that. Also at the end, it's going to give you a survey on how I did. So please feel free to give me any pointers or just let me know how I'm doing. That also helps. I can't become a better instructor unless I know how I am doing. Can the whole detail view be a component? So it could. The only thing with families and creating it as a detail component, which people do as well, that's another workflow. I just don't tend to show it. Is being able to go through in what the question was asked is, can I create the whole detail view as a component? What you can do is you can create a family that's a detail item that's specific for it, right? So you go new family, you can go and do a detail item, whatever type of, well, no, not whatever type of family. Let me take that back. But you can go and create a detail item. If you're going through and creating a family that has the whole detail in here, that is a workflow by all means, right? I can go and import. The only thing is in here, you're going to go by object styles, which I don't prefer the method of object styles. And then these object styles are also controlled out in your project. So in your project, you're going to go and see these as object styles underneath. So if I were to add a new object style, we'll just say, so I'm adding a new subcategory under detail items. I'm going to say show EX so that we see this in our project. These are going to be controlled outside in your project on a project to project basis. So if I go in and load this into my exploding files, it's just blank. That's fine. But now I can go to my manage object styles. These are going to be under, object styles. Detail items, and you'll have the new ones here. So these are controlled from here. Any other questions? All righty. Thank you today for joining me feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. Also, don't forget to check out ATG's YouTube channel as well as all of our social media. I will bring that slide over to the next one here in a second, but let me answer some questions. Thank you for joining me. Kevin, you asked before you take off, are you still here? Yes, you are. So if it's drawn to one-to-one scale, it is one-to-one. So when it's brought in, that is a one-to-one scale. I could change the scale of the Revit project of the drafting view. It doesn't change the scale of what was drawn from the AutoCAD, if that makes sense. If it was drawn one-to-one, I import it and I change it to 3/4 of an inch equals a foot. It's not going to change that one-to-one to 3/4. It was still one-to-one before, and you're going to have to scale to 3/4. You can run your dimensions just to verify if you need to too. So you typically want to draw it out what scale you want it to be in Revit in AutoCAD, then import it, change the scale to that scale to reflect it. Because they're not annotative. So when you're bringing them in, they're at scale of what they're at. They don't scale up to what it's supposed to be. Any other questions? All righty. Remember to subscribe to ATG social media, stay in the loop on LinkedIn, as well as get 24 access on our YouTube. I highly suggest checking this out. There's a ton of content on there going through not just Revit pertaining items. We here at ATG are a platinum partner for Autodesk. We are also a platinum partner for Bluebeam and a ton of other things. So please check us out.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe and check out some of the other content on our channel.